When it comes to dealing with blanket weed or string algae, I find that the maturity of the pond plays a huge factor. But with that said, there are many reasons that contribute to blanket weed growth. So in this video, I want to quickly discuss some of the most common reasons for algae or blanket weed taking over your pond and hopefully offer some solutions. If you don't already know me, my name is Kev, and the aim of my channel is to help people build and maintain a pond without spending a fortune. If that sounds like something that interests you, you might like to subscribe and visit my website, ozponds.com. Blanket weed or algae, it's the same thing and broadly covers a lot of different types of filamentous algae, the kinds you can easily pick up, scoop out, or twirl around. In this video, the topics we're going to look at are nutrients, sunlight, water chemistry, treatments, and the biological process. I'm sure you've heard algae needs nutrient and sunlight to grow, no big secret there. The most common nutrients that are present in a pond are phosphates and nitrogen. There's lots of ways we can reduce the amount of nutrient inside a pond. We can have low fish numbers, we can feed very little, we can optimize our filtration, we can do water changes, we can use plants to consume nutrient, and we can restrict the amount of nutrient-rich water that enters the pond. So low fish numbers and low feeding will result in a less burden on the filter system. This should lead to less nitrogen. There's so many types of filters, and getting it right often depends on your particular pond. Biological filters will process ammonia and nitrite and leave you with nitrate. In my ponds, my biological filters are almost always a bog filter. I find that my bog filters basically complete the nitrogen cycle and I'm left with no detectable nitrate. You'll find many videos and articles on my website dedicated to bog filters if that's something you want to explore more of. Then we have mechanical filters. These will physically remove waste from the pond. This could be simply sponges that get rinsed off, drum filters that auto-clean, or protein skimmers that use oxygen to remove organic compounds. Again, the more physical waste we remove, the less nutrients we should have in the water. Then we have plants. Plants will use phosphates and nitrogen to grow, so they can help starve the algae or blanket weed by outcompeting it. And we can also dilute nutrient levels inside the pond by doing regular water changes. My preference is rainwater, but you can also use tap water and treat it with a water conditioner. I think rainwater is as close to pure H2O as you can get, at least on a large scale. I'm not trying to fill my pond with reverse osmosis water. Therefore, I'm more than happy to top up with rainwater. If you've tested and you know that phosphate is your problem, you can purchase phosphate binders. These are products that will lock up the phosphate. Then you can use them as plant food in the garden. I'll throw a link in the description. Runoff entering a pond can be rich in nutrient. If you have bare earth around the pond and topsoil is entering the pond, that will increase the nutrients, as will any fertilizers from surrounding lawns and gardens. You'll want to remedy these situations or look at creating ways to slow down the water and help remove or filter some of these impurities before they reach the pond. So we need to do our best to create a low nutrient pond if we want to prevent algae or blanket weed. Next we have sunlight. It's true that ponds with crystal clear water are more susceptible to algae or blanket weed as the sun can penetrate right through the water column. I like clear water, so I'm not going to purposely have cloudy water just so I have no blanket weed. In nature, you'll notice that water bodies are often quite dark due to tannins from organic materials like logs and leaves in the water. The darker water limits light penetration and makes it harder for algae to grow. Ponds in full shade won't grow algae as there's no sunlight to give it energy, so you can plant lots of trees or add shade sails if this is a path you want to go down. Pond dye is another popular option as it darkens the water and limits the light penetration. I tried this on my dream pond. I wanted to see if I could prevent the new pond syndrome, which is lots of algae growth that's feeding on the nutrients added during the pond construction. I was very liberal with the dye, and I still got algae and had a funny looking Smurf blue pond. And this kind of goes to my point about allowing a pond to mature. The pond is in full sun. During construction, it got quite muddy due to all the rock and the pebble. All that mud is nutrient, and even as the filters started to clear the water, the nutrient remains. It needs to be processed, and that takes time. The pond is still in full sun, but each year there's less and less algae or blanket weed present. The biological processes have increased, there's more diversity of bacteria, plants, and organisms, and the entire ecosystem becomes much more robust. That's just one example of one of my ponds, but I've seen it play out time and again in all my ponds, no matter what size or their location. So sun will absolutely help algae thrive, but there are many ponds, man-made and natural, that have no algae issues in full sun. Next is water chemistry. So many people have opinions on this, so I'm just going to give you mine. You can agree or disagree. If you want to research it further, I recommend that, as it's quite fascinating. When we talk about water chemistry in a pond, we're looking at the pH, how acidic or alkaline the water is, and the levels of nitrogen, which are your ammonias, your nitrites, and your nitrates. We also might look at the GH, that's the general hardness of the water, and there's KH, which stands for carbonate hardness. Now basically all these things interact, and different levels can indicate different things. But what I think is important is stability. If my pond has a pH of 7, that doesn't mean that your pond needs to have the same. Again, maturity is a big factor here. Over time, a water body will find its balance and stabilize. In the beginning, it'll be all over the place. People with highly managed ponds and aquariums will measure these numbers and adjust them accordingly. I'm more interested in creating an ecosystem that's easy to manage and more hands-off. So I do understand that in a densely populated koi pond, my approach isn't very beneficial at all, at least in regard to water chemistry. However, the basics of filtering water still remain the same. Anyway, in my ponds we have rock, pebble, wood, organic material. Some of these elements are pulling the numbers one way, some the other. I don't care. I let the pond find its balance, and whatever the numbers are, that's what the numbers are, and I don't give it a second thought. In nature, we have areas with incredibly low pH, lots of organics, and there's an abundance of plant and fish that have adapted to these environments. We also have areas with very high pH, and again, we have species that will thrive. If you want to learn more about water chemistry, I think checking out blackwater aquariums with really low pH and contrasting that with something like a Tanganyikan cichlid setup with high pH, it's all quite fascinating. Anyway, both are very different environments, but both are healthy and robust. So again, I'm just looking to create a pond that becomes its own unique ecosystem, and I give it the time to mature. Next is algae products and animals that will eat algae. If we can create a healthy food chain, our pond ecosystem will practically take care of itself. Algae and biofilm that you see growing on your rocks, plants, or on the walls of the pond are a vital part of the food chain. There's many very small bacteria and organisms living here and processing nutrient and the waste products. Snails, invertebrates, and fish will pick away at the biofilms, algae, and the tiny creatures that are feeding on it. Again, I think the more diverse the pond is, the better, and the easier it is to manage. Obviously, if your pond is dominated by large koi in a small area, they're going to basically eat everything. If I kept koi, I'd have a really nice big oversized bog filter where I could have an area of refuge for all these beneficial animals and bacteria to thrive, away from the large hungry fish. There are products that can help you kickstart the food chain in a new pond. I like new algae and diatomics. There's links to both products on my website. These products encourage the growth of diatoms, which will form a base of the food chain by giving tiny plankton a food source. These products are also pretty useful on older, larger ponds with a failed food chain. The idea of creating a thriving food chain is that nutrients are cycled through the ecosystem. One thing uses energy to grow, then gets eaten by something else, and then uses that combined energy to grow bigger, and on it goes. Even koi and goldfish ponds probably need to be fed way less than most people do. These fish like to graze on plant material, algae/blanket weed included. Then we have a bevy of products on the market that can kill algae. I've tried quite a few, especially in my earlier days of pond keeping. I think if you want to kill algae with a product, hydrogen peroxide or sodium bicarbonate is probably my preferred method. But any product that you use to kill the algae, it does nothing to stop it returning. If the algae dies and breaks down inside the pond, the nutrients remain and it will regrow. Bacteria, good filtration, and healthy food ecosystems are much better long-term solutions. Actually manually removing it is more effective as you literally pull out the nutrient that the algae used to grow. In older ponds with deep sediment layers that start to experience algae, it might be necessary to manually remove some of the sludge buildup. I try to prevent the layers of debris getting too thick in my ponds. Some is beneficial, too much and it starts to slow down the biological activity. A bit of netting here and there or a little vacuum is all that's needed. I don't want to fully drain and wash the pond, otherwise I run the risk of resetting the pond back to new pond phase. There are bacteria products that will help consume sludge, but you need to be using them regularly and they're slow working. Most people won't do it long term. So in this video I tried to just scratch the surface of these topics. If I went in depth it would be an hour-long video. There's also no doubt issues that I didn't cover. It's quite difficult to cover broadly this topic as there's so many different styles of ponds and so many different variables. I hope by sharing my approach you can find useful elements that will help you with your pond. For me, the secret to combating algae, or pretty much any pond issue, is good filtration, creating a robust ecosystem, a little maintenance, and some patience. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, feel free to tickle the thumbs up button. Thanks for watching. See ya.